Okay, excellent. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you to my college planning team as well. I'm Brandon from the St. Charles Public Library. I'm just going to do an introduction and then I'll just kind of let them take it from there. But tonight, our presentation is Scholarships, Grants, and Loans. And this is presented by my college planning team. And they're going to talk to you about kind of strategies to pay for college and make it more affordable. So, I will hand it over to you.
Hello. Thank you so much, Brandon. My name is Amanda Goll, and I'd like to welcome you tonight to for our workshop, Scholarships, Grants, and Loans. I have been with my college planning team for just over a year now. I'm a high school counselor in Michigan. I've been working with students and families for, gosh, over 13 years now. And it's really just one of my favorite things, the college planning, post-secondary planning process. And working with my college planning team just gives me that additional opportunity to help families. So thank you so much for having us here tonight. And we will go ahead and get started. Before we do get started, I saw somebody was posting about an echo. I'm not hearing an echo. I hope everything's okay. But I would love to get to know the families that we have here tonight. If you can, in the chat box, post the grade levels of your students so we can make sure that we're guiding you in the best possible way for our audience tonight. Tonight's workshop, we'll cover college pricing and how financial aid works. Colleges mostly highlight their top line list price, but tonight's higher ed environment means that there are extensive discounts to be had on the price and definitely different ways to fund a college career for every student. We're going to outline how discounts and aid work so that you understand the different types. And then this will hopefully help equip you more effectively. Every family is different, so we definitely encourage you to schedule a free conference with us during or after our event so that you can spend time getting information from one of our team members about your individual concerns and priorities. We present our workshop tonight, please feel free to add your questions in the chat box as we go, and we'll try to answer those along and triage those, and then hopefully we'll have time for a live Q&A at the end as well. So let's start with my college planning team, who we are and what we do. We are a team of academic and financial professionals with many years of providing college planning support and advice to help families prepare and pay for college. Our college planning software is FINRA reviewed, and we ensure that we are always providing advice that's in your best interest. Some team members have expertise in admissions. Others are experienced college counselors at some of our local private and public high schools, such as myself. And others are specialists in financial aid or college finances. Many have won awards for their exemplary work with students and are regularly quoted in higher trade and mass media press outlets. The mission of my college planning team is to empower, engage, and support families with financial and academic strategies to reduce cost and gain students admission to a best fit college. To achieve this mission, we provide academic, application, and financial support to families with the goal of helping your child enjoy a satisfying college experience and rewarding post college lives as well. So, tonight we're going to cover three main types of financial aid: scholarships, grants, and loans. Our amazing financial aid expert, Chandani, will join me later to cover these sources of aid to help you plan your college journey. Near the end of the presentation tonight, I'm also going to add in a link in the chat box for you to complete a brief survey. Please fill this out to give us your feedback so that we can make sure that we're addressing any questions of interest and that we're making good use of your time. So again, make sure to use that chat box for any questions. So here's an insightful quote from a great book by the author Kalman Chaney. When it comes to paying for college, there are two prices, one for the informed and one for the uninformed. Tonight, we're going to start the process of getting you informed about how the financial aid system works so that you can benefit instead of allowing it to take advantage of you. We all know that college is worth it. I think it's important to note that those with a bachelor degree earn about $1 million more over their lifetime than those with a high school diploma. And those with a professional degree can earn up to 2 million more over the course of their lifetime. Even during the pandemic, these numbers have stayed consistent. So in addition to earning more over a lifetime, those with college degree actually have much lower unemployment rates as well. So as we start to talk about college planning, the cost of college, it's always good to remember why college is so important. In 2023, a national study about how America pays for college, Sallie Mae surveyed college students and parents of undergraduate students to get a sense of how they feel about higher education and how they're planning to pay for it. One of the questions regarding just general feelings around college and higher education, the study found that 89% of families think that college is a good investment. However, the sad truth is that only 53% actually have a plan in place on how they're going to pay for it. So many families are coming up short on what they need to get their students through those 4 years of college. One of the academic strategies that, we talk about is graduating on time with you're getting your degree in 4 years. Some of the statistics around graduation, one of those is that out of all high school graduates who enter college as freshmen, 26% of them do not return for their sophomore year. That's about a quarter of all college freshmen that don't return each year. 37% of students end up transferring from one college to another. And then two-thirds of students who do return for their sophomore year of college end up taking more than 4 years of college to get their 4-year degree. Okay, are you ready for this? The national average on how long it really takes for a student to graduate. 5.8 years. That's almost 6 years. Now, there are a few main reasons why it takes students longer to graduate, or in some cases, even drop out altogether. Academics can definitely play a big part. Some students can't handle the rigor or coursework, while others might change their major and prolong their time in college. That was me. Some students arrive on campus and are unhappy or even hate it. This is one of the main reasons why I'm always recommending, just especially as a school counselor, I've got kids of my own. I have an eighth grader and a 10th grader. I'm always recommending, make sure that you visit campus before you actually put down that final deposit. The last thing that you want to do is get to campus, especially if it's out of state across the country and not like it. One of the other main reasons that we see for students not graduating is that they're doing fine academically, but then they drop out because they can't afford the college that they've decided to attend. So, this is why planning and finding the right fit is so important. It doesn't just have an upside, it also helps avoid a downside. And unfortunately, we really do see that downside too often. So, thinking back to that financial piece of college planning, these are some resources that many families look to for help. So, your students' GPA and sometimes test scores will determine the size of your institutional scholarship. There are also private scholarships that you can pursue. One key note is to be sure to learn how your college is going to treat those private scholarships, as it's actually possible that you'll get no value from them. And we'll talk more about that part later. Your high school counselor can also be a great resource in helping your student. However, I'm not sure about the ratios at your student's high school, but the national average of students to school counselors is 408 to 1. In Illinois, it's 522 students to one counselor is the average. So, our school counselors, myself, we are great people to come to. I hope that that average is a little bit better at your school, but that's another reason why we're here to help as well. And though the college can also help you, it may be limited to what their particular school can do for you. They're not there to provide you with those financial strategies that you can use to reduce that net price. Be like asking the IRS if they have any tax strategies you can use to reduce your tax bill. And then, of course, there's your family accountant if you have one. Well, they're an expert in taxes. You need to ensure that they're aware of the impact of tax savings on the price that you pay for college, especially with all the changes with the new FAFSA. So, scholarships. What are scholarships? Who gives out this money? How do I get one? Where can I find out about them? As an advisor to families, these are all questions about scholarships that I'm asked on a daily basis. The sources of funds are really keys to determining how much you're going to pay for college. So, we're going to talk about some different types of scholarships, what elements are included in a college application, and how to locate those various scholarships. Note that scholarships and grants can sometimes be used interchangeably at different institutions, and there are also federal grants, but we'll get into those later. So, when we're looking at who awards scholarships, those organizations can range from the college itself to private foundations. A key difference here is that scholarships from a college can only be used at that college. Those from outside the university can usually be used in a variety of eligible institutions of higher learning. So, really understanding where that scholarship is coming from and where it can be used, and even what it can be used on. So we'll start by looking at scholarships and grants from the college's central administration, so typically the financial aid or admissions office. We'll distinguish between two types of aid from universities. The first one, scholarships. Those are mostly tied to a student's academics, although a few scholarships exist for certain demographic groups. For example, colleges these days are focusing on recruiting first generation college students, students whose parents haven't completed college. So they might have some specific scholarships for students with that criteria. However, the bulk of scholarships are going to be tied to academics. This type of aid is primarily based on your student's GPA and could be SAT or ACT scores that might be considered if your student is not applying test optional. To be considered for a merit scholarship, students must complete their application, including transcript and recommendations if needed, by the priority deadline and make sure that they're meeting certain academic criteria. It's possible that the application itself might have a separate deadline and then another priority deadline for merit scholarships. So, making sure to keep an eye on those different deadlines. Certain scholarships might even require an additional application, or they might be automatically considered for those. So, just making sure, again, to pay attention to what those requirements are and the deadlines, and making sure that if there's any additional information that they need to submit, that they're keeping track of that. Some schools might require students to submit the FAFSA to be considered for merit scholarships. So, just understanding those requirements as well. And that's where, again, that research, tracking, those are going to be very important when it comes to not only college applications and just scholarships in general, but those institutional scholarships and really understanding what's required for each college. It's also important to note that colleges don't have unlimited money to give away when it comes to scholarships. So, applying early in the process is going to be your best bet if you're interested or in need of getting those scholarships. A decent number of colleges actually have charts or grids that break down GPA and sometimes test scores that are needed for certain levels of merit aid. One example is West Virginia University. Since WVU went test optional, they have both a scholarship grid with test scores and one without. So this here is an example that depends on GPA. And I will go ahead and I'll actually put that link in the chat box if you want to check that out sometime. And you can even do a search for other colleges that have merit aid based on test scores or GPA, and sometimes those grids might just pop up for you. So, when your student applies early for admission and early for departmental scholarships, they're not only showing a demonstrated interest in the institution, but can also potentially increase their opportunities for admission and merit aid. Another way to really demonstrate that vested interest in the institution is signing up for and attending a campus visit. That could be in person or it could be online, even. This is going to give your student the opportunity to connect with an admissions officer who may be one day reviewing their application. But what many families don't know is that colleges these days are giving scholarships to students who sign up for and attend a campus visit, either in person or virtually online. For example, Augustana's visitor scholarship is renewable for 4 years, which totals $4,000. Raise.me is a scholarship source that also has a page dedicated just to institutions that give scholarships for visiting. So definitely, take a peek, see what's out there. A nice Google search too, just see any scholarships for visiting colleges. Or even some colleges will fly students out to visit and pay for them to come out there. So, as you're doing your research on each college's website, be sure to search their scholarship page for visitor scholarships. Make sure that you're following those steps that are outlined there and that your student is earning those easy scholarships. Another type of institutional scholarship is awarded by programs or academic departments. Here you can see some of the best practices for winning some of those scholarships. Many high school seniors don't apply for departmental scholarships because maybe they hear that departmental scholarships are generally awarded to only juniors or seniors who've declared that major and maybe even proven their commitment to the major. However, that might be true at some colleges. There are plenty of colleges that do offer departmental scholarships for incoming freshmen. So, as you're researching colleges, don't forget to dig a bit deeper into your search and check out those departmental scholarships on their website. See if your student might be eligible for one. They often require a separate application. So, definitely continue your research, keep track of everything. There's lots of opportunities out there. And then private scholarships, of course, this is financial aid awarded by companies, maybe some service groups, foundations, organizations, individuals. There are so many different private scholarships out there. They range greatly in value and are typically tailored to the issuing organization. For instance, a museum may offer a scholarship for students pursuing art history. A bank may issue scholarships for finance majors. You can look for private scholarships for just about any purpose or situation as long as you know where to look. So, check with your family's employer, religious organizations, maybe even the union. I know the Michigan Education Agency has a scholarship for um, staff who are part of the union for their children. So definitely, any students out there, check with your parents. Parents, check with, your employer and see what might be available. Some high schools, make a point to gather data on local scholarships and oftentimes, oh my gosh, these are just neglected in applying and often really easy to get those local scholarships. Not many students end up applying. I'm always telling my students scholarships are like lottery. You have to play to win, and it's also like having a job. You really do have to put in the work. Scholarships at our school are just completely underapplied for. Students don't want to take that extra initiative, maybe an extra essay could be only $500 or $1,000. And, it takes that extra time. But I don't know about you. I don't know many jobs that pay, $500 or $1,000 an hour for, writing an essay. So definitely take advantage, push your student, offer them some sort of incentive just to apply for those scholarships. So in just a minute, I'm going to share some of the best online sites for finding some private scholarships. First, I think it's necessary to, just give you some warnings about some scams that are out there. One thing to avoid is, students who are eager to find free money for college. Make sure that you are having this conversation with your students about potential scams. Legitimate scholarship providers are never going to ask for social security information or banking information. Never, ever, ever pay an application fee for scholarships. And also, scholarships that claim to have a high success rate are more likely promotional in nature and might come with a lot of caveats. So, just definitely, pay attention. The ones that are relatively easy to obtain are that way because it's hard to find out about them. So, they don't have a marketing budget or anything like that. So here are some good sites that I highly recommend. FastWeb, beginning of junior year, have your students sign up on the website, fastweb.com. It's a great scholarship search engine where they enter profile information about themselves to be matched with scholarships, and then have them download the app on their phone. They'll be sent notifications for every scholarship that they qualify for. We know kids are, glued to their phones. So when you're driving to a sporting event or, watching a sibling play, just have them, look for those applications while they're chilling. Scholarship Owl is a one-stop scholarship platform that makes it easy for students to find and apply for scholarships as well. It's free, all from one site. Students fill out profile, get matched only to scholarships that they're eligible for, and then they can apply directly from the Scholarship Owl site. Niche also has a great app that my students tell me it's very user friendly. CAPEX, Peterson's, scholarships.com. Those are three of the tried and true scholarship search engines as well. Students have been using these for years with great success. So I definitely recommend those. And colleges are required by law to disclose how they'll treat private scholarships. And it's really important to know, as I mentioned. So here's an important inside tip regarding scholarships. As you're researching colleges, make sure that you ask the Office of Financial Aid their stance on private scholarships. While most colleges will allow students to use them to pay down unmet need and reduce how much they pay, others will only reduce student loans. About a quarter of all colleges will actually reduce grant money for which the student is eligible for in an amount equal to the private scholarship. So this means that the family could receive zero value for all the hours of work that they put into winning those scholarships. So be sure to ask if the outside scholarship will result in a reduction of other financial aid. You can check out discolored.org for private scholarship displacement policies at colleges and universities across the country. And I'll put that one in the chat box as well. So I'd like to leave you with the top 5 private scholarship best practices to help guide you and your student in the scholarship application process. It's never too early to start the scholarship search. Your student does not need to wait until senior year to create profiles on scholarship sites. As I mentioned, I've got a 10th grader, had her sign up last year for different sites. As they're researching colleges early on or in their high school career, they can create a list of which ones offer departmental scholarships for their intended major. And it's also never too early to start asking local community organizations about the scholarships that they offer. Oftentimes, these stay the same from year to year. Colleges usually award scholarships with deadlines in alignment with their application deadlines or soon after, so keeping track of that. And many local private scholarships are posted in the winter or spring months. At my school, we see the biggest influx of local scholarships that we post to our website, generally in January or February. And then again, don't apply for a scholarship that charges a fee in order to apply. Scholarships are not going to require a financial contribution as part of the application process. And your student's essay is also a critical component of their scholarship application oftentimes. So a good one is really going to help them stand out to the reviewer. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Chandani Rao, who is going to explain grants, which is another form of gift aid that you can use to pay for college. Welcome, Chandani.
Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is, Amanda just mentioned, is Chandani Rao, and I'm the COO of MCPT. Previously, I was a client service manager, which I've done for the past 20 plus years. I have 3 kids, one in college and one about to go next year. So I totally understand the stress and anxiety that this process can create. It's not straightforward. It's one of the reasons I enjoy what I do, is helping to take some of that weight off of you, helping to understand the various financial models that schools use, and answering questions along the way. So there really is such a joy to give you that light at the end of the tunnel. There's such a joy and a sense of relief as you watch your child grow and mature in a right fit college. So next, we're going to shift to grants that are not tied to academic support, to academic or demographic characteristics, and are not given out directly by an academic department or program, which is what Amanda just went through. So starting with, college is about academics, of course, and if a student's growing into adults as well, as I was just mentioning. One aspect that you have to understand, though, is it is still a commercial transaction, and the college will look out for their interest in this transaction, right? So their financial aid officer's job is to protect the assets of the college and give away as little money as possible. Your job is to use your college search and financial aid rules to make your contribution to the college as small as possible. So just understanding some of the core elements of this will really help quite a bit. So none of this also implies that colleges are bad. After all, they want students to enroll, have successful college careers, and graduate, and ultimately become loyal parts of the alumni network, right? But they do have their own interests to advance. Budgets they have to hit. We all know that if you're in any corporate world or own businesses, bills to pay. And in that respect, it is a business, right? Many grants from colleges are tied to the marketplace, where colleges are putting in a lot of effort into recruiting students and filling their open seats. The laws of supply and demand operate in the business of college just as they do in the marketplace. So if your student's in high demand based on their academic performance or particular skills or interests, you can often get more money. And this money will come in the form of grants, usually assigned by the financial or admissions office. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the concept of financial need and what a college can use to fill that demonstrated financial need. Under need-based are really grants or gift aid is the good stuff, right? Money that you don't need to pay back, which you can see on the left. Self-help aid, on the other hand, requires your student to work on campus or take out loans, which are on the right. So we'll break these down a little bit further. For need-based, these are directly related to your FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid application to qualify for them. The most important federal program is the Pell Grant, which is intended to help students without high family incomes attend college. And the grant is determined by the SAI, which is the Student Aid Index, which includes assets and family characteristics in its formula. The EFC, which is the previous name for the SAI, it's switching this year as part of some of the changes that we'll talk about. Last year, the cutoff for grants, or I should say the 23-24 year, which is kind of our current year, was 6,600 and change there. So if you're not below that, you're not going to get a Pell Grant, and that's one of the core elements. And a lot of people think, okay, then I shouldn't even bother with it. However, we're going to go into reasons why you should bother with the FAFSA still. So before we get to that, though, I also want to hit that last item there, state grants. You also want to be aware of state programs and whether you qualify. There are programs in Georgia, Illinois, New Jersey, just to name a few. Georgia's HOPE program is that name there, New Jersey's College Promise program. You guys probably heard of the Illinois MAP, Monetary Award Program, grant. So those are things just to also think about, in addition to the federal options that you may have. On the non-need-based side, you have work study, and then you have loans. The main one being the federal Stafford Direct Loan that you see there. We usually recommend to families that their student take that loan to help pay for college. It gives them a little bit of skin in the game, makes them, responsible and owning up to this as well. Kind of like your insurance, co-insurance or co-pays that they add in nowadays. Every student, regardless of family assets or income, is eligible for that $5,500 the first year, $6,500 the second year, and $7,500 in the third and fourth years. The loans are typically unsubsidized, although depending on need, a part of that may be subsidized by the Department of Education. Being subsidized just means that the interest when your child is in school full-time is paid for by the Department of Education. And regardless of whether it's subsidized or not, your repayments start 6 months after graduation with that. Otherwise, if it's unsubsidized, you're paying monthly interest, and you can pay it as you go along, you or your child, or you can let it compound into the loan total. Either way, the payments start that 6 months after graduation. So in the last item on there, the Parent Plus loan is another matter. Not only is the interest higher, but there's also an origination fee of over 4% and rates over 8%. That being said, the loan can also be paid back based on a family's discretionary income and even offers some forgiveness provisions. So while it may be an excellent borrowing strategy for some families, it's not for everyone. So it's important to consider that you need to know all of the details about the loan before you borrow, as it can get complicated. Just want to jump back to, and there's so many acronyms and definitions, to just make sure everybody's clear on some of these terms, and feel free to ask any questions in the chat as well. But cost of attendance includes direct costs. Those are things that are paid directly to the college. That's why it's called direct cost, which are your tuition, room and board, and your fees typically. Indirect costs, which are expenses that your child will have, but they're not paid directly to the college, include books, as you see there, travel, living cost. Sometimes there's other program fees as well. So that's just important to know the difference between those and those minor expenses. There are sometimes, you can look at those indirect costs and even assess, do those apply to me or not? So you can think about how far that school is, right? For traveling, do you need to include a lot of flights or not? Some you may need to raise that amount, others you can probably lower it. So it's important to look at that aspect too, because usually that total cost of attendance is what they're looking at to make sure that you have those funds available for paying for college. So how much aid you receive is influenced, but not dictated directly by, again, that's the SAI, the Student Aid Index. So again, that name, if you were working with colleges in the past, or you have an older child in school, EFC, expected family contribution, is the same thing as SAI. So I know we've gotten a lot of questions on that, so I just want to make that very clear. And that's starting with this 24-25 year, so our seniors that are going next year. So your SAI is what the government thinks you can afford to pay for college. It's based on certain criteria, such as size of family, oldest parent, parent and child assets, and heavily on parent and child income. They use this to assign, again, the Pell Grants and part of that FAFSA, right? And other higher education funding. Remember, entering college is done via a marketplace. So the SAI influences, but doesn't dictate the actual market price you pay in the end. Lowering your SAI is generally a good idea because it increases financial aid and scholarship money you'll be eligible for. And as I mentioned, that expected implementation of the FAFSA Simplification Act for this next year is currently being finalized, which has put schools and families in a more uncertain gray area on many topics. Well, the FAFSA typically opens on October 1st of the senior year. This year, it's expected at some point in December. So it's definitely a change and may affect some of us more than others. So let's just go on to, how this SAI is used. I just want to note that schools, as I said, use your SAI to calculate what aid they will offer based on their own formulas. So they look at your demonstrated need, which is your cost of attendance less your student aid index, and then they take into account how much need that particular school chooses to fill, right? And it differs by school. Some may fill 100%. You may have heard of meets needs schools that fill all of your demonstrated need. Others may be much less, like 70% or 50%. And of that demonstrated need that they fill, you're looking for those that cover it with gift aid, ideally, versus self-help aid, right? Loans or work study programs, as I mentioned before. So as an example, if a cost of attendance of a school is $60,000 and your SAI index, right, your student aid index comes up to be $30,000, you have $30,000 of demonstrated need, right? 60 minus 30. Some schools will cover 100% of that need. Some may only cover 50%. So if it, for example, was 50% that school covered of additional gift aid, then you're responsible for the difference. And in this case, it would be another 15,000. So you'd be responsible for 45,000, and then you would likely get 15,000 in aid from the school in whatever format they decide to issue that. So it just gives you an idea of how that works and why your SAI is only an index, and each school's formula applied to that determines what they'll offer you. So that's also a great opportunity too. If you are interested in a free conference to discuss your personal situation, we can put a link in the chat too, so you can schedule a free conference and can look at 3 schools for you, your specific needs and financials, to give you an idea about what that school would cost for one of your children. So without going to mind-bending detail, the SAI is produced by a complex formula that includes a combination of, like I mentioned, of family characteristics and your family's income and assets. Income includes both wages and also business income and distributions from investments, along with some other sources. Whether the parent or student earns the income has an impact, as they're assessed at different rates. And the impact of assets depends on who holds them, the parent or the student, with some assets excluded from consideration, like retirement funds. All of these factor into the FAFSA and have an impact on your SAI. In the actual financial aid award letters students receive after being accepted, merit and need are usually combined. So it's often difficult to tell whether your grant from a college is the result of need. You can be sure that need plays a big role in the software helping colleges assign financial aid, but it's often buried in that final result. As for the merit piece of the puzzle, colleges today use sophisticated models based on a great deal of historical information to guess what they think you're able and willing to pay, right? And most of the time, it's not the list price or the cost of attendance. So they offer you a discount to get close to that ideal price that they think you'll pay, the market price. Many schools build in a little bit of a buffer, knowing that you may come back asking for additional assistance as well. So just want to get into using the FAFSA to estimate need. In that instance, that methodology is the federal methodology. So they just use the FAFSA and your SAI that comes out of there. It's used by a majority of schools, including most public universities. Of course, it's never that simple. So there's also the institutional methodology that's used by a smaller group of generally more expensive selective colleges to calculate their version of need. They use an additional form called the CSS profile, you can see there, which is not produced by the federal government like the FAFSA, but by the College Board, a private nonprofit. It's the same group that does SATs and the AP exams. Colleges like Harvard, Stanford, University of Chicago, and Syracuse use the CSS profile. So does the University of Michigan. So there are some public universities that also use it. You can easily find a list by Googling CSS profile schools. We point this out because sometimes one of the strategies that may work well for the federal methodology may not for the institutional methodology. It's slightly complex topic, but we're going to break down just some examples to give you an idea of what those are. Every family has their own unique, financial profile. So the ideal of starting the process of getting your tax strategies done 2 years in advance is important, because the FAFSA has a 2-year look back on income. So students going to school in 2025, this year, 2023, will be their base year. For those of us with 2024 students going next year, our base year is already completed, right? Last year in 2022. So that's important to know. So let's jump into the federal methodology and how things that are not accounted for on the FAFSA there. They do not consider untaxed income. They do not count contributions from grandparents, home equity, sibling assets, and has a student income protection allowance. So those are important elements to note there. We're going to get into some detail here as we go into the institutional methodology, because they do ask for a lot more detail. The list gives you an example of how they differ just by reading these off, right? So they may assess non-custodial parents' income and assets, so you typically do. Home equity is often assessed, and that's a huge one. So I want to point that out from the last slide to this one. Not assessed there, often assessed here. There is a handful of schools using the institutional methodology that does not assess home equity. There's majority of them do though. And some of them, there's another handful that do it at the full amount of your equity. There are others that may limit it. They may do it something like put an upper bounds on it, 2 times your income or something like that to keep it reasonable, especially if most of your money is in a home. That can be something really important to consider. So it can greatly affect which colleges are more affordable for you. Sibling assets are assessed. Business value is assessed, but at a lower rate. And money sent from family members outside the household may be assessed as student income. So, an example of how these two compete, if you can see there even already, paying down your mortgage might be a great strategy if your student's considering a school using the federal methodology, but not so great if it's using one considering the institutional methodology that also assesses the full value of your home equity. So those are things that are looked at. Then there's income strategies that you can sometimes use to potentially lower your SAI. So as I mentioned, the FAFSA is based on income 2 years prior to enrollment. So you want to start planning early to help affect any of these elements. But keeping the student's income under the current protection allowance, as I mentioned before, there's a big jump this year to, and usually it goes up a little bit each year, but this year it's jumping up to $9,410. And it's important to note that even once your child's in school, that this does not include work study or co-op income. So that's a really nice boundary that they give you, a nice chunk of area where your student can earn money that isn't even going to be assessed. So if possible, take advantage of as much of that as you possibly can. Always offset capital gains with capital losses if you have them, and you can, because capital gains are assessed as income and therefore can hurt you with the results from your FAFSA. If you're scheduled to get a bonus at the end of the year and your company is willing to give you to you a few days later in January, it could result in a big EFC reduction in your first and most important base year. And the last one, you really need to talk to your accountant about that one, because you may be helping yourself in one area and hurting yourself in another. So you need to balance that. Right now, the way that taxes are handled right now, what you're paying out is credited back to you really against your assessments. So it is a positive to have paid more taxes in your base year versus if you're able to take those deductions prior to or after your base year. So by assessable assets, we mean those assets counted and included in the FAFSA calculation of your SAI. So you can see the list on this slide, right? Savings, stocks and mutual funds, bonds, custodial account, your UGMAs and UTMAs, 529s and Coverdales. And the great thing about 529s is they are assessed at a parent rate, which is lower than a student rate. So that's great. UGMAs and UTMAs are typically at the student rate. Vacation homes, rental properties, and trusts. So one of the things with savings there that you will also want to understand is if you have assets that you're saving for your child's college, but they're your assets, so you're putting money aside, don't save them in your child's name, save them in your own name, because assets held in the child's name are assessed at either 20 or 25%. depending on the school. So if your child has $20,000 in a savings account that's in their name, you'll likely have raised that SAI by $4,000 or $5,000. So again, if you have that in your name and it was your money, you should keep that in your name. So that's a good element to know about. Asset strategies, here are some assets that are not assessed or part of the calculation. As we mentioned earlier, there were some that were excluded, retirement accounts being one of them, personal items, cars, jewelry, furniture. There are some schools that will ask about, I know I had one ask about cars. What cars do you drive on the CSS profile? Home equity, except schools, as we talked about before, that use the CSS profile. Cash value held within life insurance policies and annuities, with a note that unqualified annuities are assessed under the institutional methodology. Anything pre-tax there. So the good stuff, right? College grants lower your costs. They don't need to be repaid, often guaranteed for 4 years. They don't require extra work to obtain beyond the application and the FAFSA or the CSS profile that we mentioned. And they're often much larger than the individual private scholarships that you get. So as the higher ed marketplace has evolved, the amount of non-repayable grants given out by colleges has exploded. The aid is now easily larger than all categories of financial aid. In 2018, for example, more aid was given out by the colleges themselves than the federal government gave out through the Pell Grant and its undergraduate direct student loan program combined. So it's the main driver of the exploding level of discounts that's happening in the marketplace today. And we need it given the exploding costs, right? So it's kind of a little bit of, I don't know. I've seen some colleges even say lately, one article recently that one school was dropping their price and they were not giving discounts. And I kind of like that idea. I feel a little bit less like a car salesman or knowing what to expect, like, okay, this is my price to go here, instead of it's a little bit more of a game. So, hopefully the more will go that direction, but transparency is very important. So 3 important questions to ask or know, right? You want to make sure you ask these questions when you're talking to each school. And again, as I mentioned before, feel free to sign up for a free conference where we'll run those college reports using your family's financial information for your child's top 3 schools. But what percentage of my demonstrated financial need will be filled with financial aid? What percentage of that amount will be gift aid, right? And will gift aid be reduced after the first year in college? So you want to make sure you're asking about merit scholarships too. Is it renewable in subsequent years? Will you receive it when you're studying abroad? And even with merit too, you want to make sure sometimes there's GPA requirements, what's in there for that? Will the requirements ever change for renewing it? You never can ask too many questions, right? It's those questions that will be helpful in getting to the truth of what it's going to cost you to attend a particular college. So with that, while scholarships and grants reduce your costs, loans are the second major category of financial aid and are an important tool for affording colleges since they can help finance or fund a college career. Some people put it under the area of aid, and it is assistance, but I only consider, that need or merit-based aid really is the aid the college is giving me, because I still have that bottom line net cost, and loans is just one of the tools that I use to pay that. So that's how I view them. And I think that's very important, because there are some schools, we look at a lot of college offers that we help during the appeals process. And when clients, say, okay, is this a good deal? What should I look at between these schools? And it's just amazing to see the difference between how they list them. And you have to be, really pay attention to how they categorize things. And so those are kind of some categories that I like to establish up front. It's just that loans are that tool. They're not aid necessarily. So first, we need to understand what kind of loans each option provides, right? There are federal and private loans. You can see federal or subsidized direct, unsubsidized direct, as we talked about, Parent Plus loans and Grad Plus for graduate students. And then private, there's both student loans and parent loans. I've seen a lot, especially on a lot of clients I've talked to, and also on some boards, I've seen a lot of, lesser prices being, lesser interest rates being student loans that are co-signed by parents. So those are also difficult, but those are where you can get the lower rates. They have everybody on the hook, essentially. In an effort to encourage and support higher education, the US government has put into place, though, these loan programs that you see there. So you need to file the FAFSA for those programs. The student direct loans do not require a credit check. As I mentioned before, it's just, you file, everyone is eligible for that. All of the programs are managed by the Department of Education. So, it's just important to know the difference there. Private loans, on the other hand, are usually seen as a secondary source of financing after the federal loan programs. They have advantages, and used responsibly can help, but they shouldn't be that first source of cash. Typically student private loans, as I said, need a parent cosigner, but they can offer those lower rates. This is, we always also look at how much you should take out as a loan. And a rule of thumb that we use is not more than the student will make in their first year out of college in their intended major or field, their profession that they're intending to go into. So that's important to keep in mind so that you don't get buried for years and years in debt. Otherwise, you need to look at a different school. It might not be that quite right fit, even though most of the things fit. It's not a financial fit. So let's go into, the differences. There's a few big differences, as you can see here. And again, there's mostly opposites, as you can see, just like the methodologies were. So the federal, you can repay based on income. Forgiveness is an option for some. Credit check is only for the plus loans. Interest rates are set by Congress annually. So every year you'll know what those rates are for those loans, and it's the same for that full year. Borrowing limits for undergrad students, as I mentioned before, the base limits are really that 55, 65, and 7,500 the next 2 years. There are other situations where you can do a little bit more, but those are have other requirements. So, and then on the private side, there's limited repayment options, right? You have amount due, that's what's due. Forgiveness is not an option. Good credit is required, right? And because of that, also, the interest rates are based on your credit. So if you have great credit, you should get better interest rates than somebody who has poor credit, right? And you can also get higher amounts there then as well. But that's also something to be aware of. Again, we don't want you to get buried under a mountain of debt, or your children, as there virtually are no limits for students or parents. So those with good credit really can get a significant amount of money out, which we do not advise. So next, because direct student loans are capped at that 27,000 I just mentioned, when you total those up for a student's undergraduate college career, many families do look to the Parent Plus loans. Again, they're loaned out and administered by the federal government. The loan limits are higher, again, which can be big problems if a family takes out too much money. We advise parents to use them with caution. Be aware of the relatively high interest rates and the origination fee the government charges when granting those loans. Why, should parents consider it? There is no loan forgiveness under the Parent Plus loan itself, under that program itself. That option is only available if you first ask your loan servicer to consolidate your loans into the federal loan consolidation program. Under certain government plans, Parent Plus loans can be repaid as a portion of discretionary income, which is really different than gross income. So it can be very small. That's like what you have left over at the end is your discretionary after your bills, not your AGI or based on any of that piece. It's a complex subject though, so we can't really cover it in depth here. But if you are experiencing issues with this currently, again, please sign up for a free conference and we can help you review that situation. Please note that despite the fact you'll be grandfathered under the current rules once you take your first disbursement, if your child will not be going to college for a few more years, the rules could change by that time. So it's something you always want to be looking at. If we confirm something by the time you're signing it, you always want to review that document again because things are constantly changing. So let's go to the 5 ways to be a smart borrower, right? We've talked about most of these, so it's really summing this up for you. But understanding federal versus private loans, Federal loans are the standard amounts and rules around the loans versus private loans, which are all individually based, right? Keeping debt proportional to expected future earnings, we talked about. Knowing the federal loan borrowing limits. The federal lifetime loan is limit is actually $57,500 versus private, which is limited based off of credit, and that's through graduate school as well. Return or turn down loans you don't need. So excess funds or refund checks, at the end of the semester aren't free. So just remember that. Make sure to send those unused checks funds back to your lender, especially if they're at a higher interest rate than you need at that point in time. There are situations where you may not want to do that, but again, those are special situations. And then lastly, learn how interest works for student loans. And that's important for our students too, to understand the loans that they're taking out in their own names, really, and their responsibilities for paying them back and how it works. I know it can get confusing with some of these too. I'll just give an example with my daughters. We've had initial loans that have come in and they assign a service provider to it, and then that provider has changed over time, and now we have a new one again. So it's setting up accounts with different ones and keeping up with that. But that's the responsibility, right, of taking that loan and the benefit of being able to have those funds available to you. So you need to make sure of that. As the current subsidized and unsubsidized interest rate for 23-24 is 5.5%. So as I mentioned, these loans are accruing while that student's in school, but they're not required to make that payment until 6 months after they graduate or drop below half-time enrollment. So tonight, our goal was to provide you with helpful information on scholarships, grants, and loans. We've given you a lot of information. I'm sure there's some questions, I'm hoping, in the chat. I'm going to take a look at in a minute. But now is really when we want to hear from you. As Amanda said in the beginning, we have a very brief evaluation of tonight's program. We'd love everyone to complete. Gives us the feedback we need to ensure the families, we're providing you guys with as much value as possible, and knowing the workshop's helpful, or other areas you might want to explore, or even other topics you'd like us to create, for the future. So we always appreciate input, and knowing that this was helpful, it's helpful for the library as well then to know for their, folks that attend. So if you have any comments or requests or would like a free conference, you can also note it there in the comments area. It'll only take you about a minute to complete, but it gives us such valuable feedback. So if you have any trouble finding or accessing that link, please let us know. And while you go ahead and do that, I'm going to take a quick look in the chat and see what questions need answering.
And we have noticed that if you happen to be watching on your phone, it might be a little difficult to open up that survey. So if that happens, let us know. We'll be sure to send that out to you by email. There was a question about
I was just going to say, I see Linda's question in there.
Yep, there you go, right there.
Yeah. So anything we can do to refinance higher rate college loans, you can take a look and see what's available in the marketplace. I know there are some companies that will do that. I have one through my company actually that will refinance them all at a lower rate. You just need to be careful too, because if any of them are federal loans, which those typically shouldn't be at a higher rate though, but if they are, you lose that federal options and protection. And just like we've had that stay over the last few years that's ended. So things like that you just want to consider with it, but there are different companies that will consolidate and refinance needed. I mean, rates had really just gone up a lot recently. Hopefully they're going to drop back down at least a good amount. And that might be a good time, or doing them in one now and then one again later. And then the other question is, how do you plan if your student doesn't know what school they want to go to? I kind of have one of those. I have one that's focused on potentially one school, but who knows? And And so you have to go with some best guess estimates, looking at, okay, you might not know which school, but are they undecided in major also? Is it, there's a bunch of factors that go into that might help you guide you into saying, okay, this is a likely scenario. We were going to be within this distance of home, and we're looking at these kind of schools or these sizes of schools, and you can see whether they're federal methodology or institutional methodology as well. And a lot of that depends on your financial situation as well too. So, and how much aid some of those schools give. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that. And I would say that's a great question for a conference as well, because we can help answer that personally. Need a little bit more personal information to give you any really relevant answer.
And I see Tim was asking, do I start school scholarships before or after I apply or have been accepted to that school? So typically it will be after you apply, not necessarily waiting until you've been accepted though. So one of the things I mentioned earlier, really taking a peek at each college's individual policies for merit aid and scholarships. There might be, I've seen, even November 1st deadlines for merit aid. So needing to not only get your application in by that time, but potentially any additional scholarship applications. And some colleges you might just be automatically considered once you've applied. Some might have additional scholarship applications. Many colleges now even have separate scholarship portals. So once you've been now, for some, it might be once you've been accepted, but for others, just once you've applied, they'll have a separate link for you to log in and be able to access any scholarships that you might qualify for just through that separate portal. So really just, spreadsheet, keep track of all those deadlines and what you might qualify for, and just continue to keep track. That's going to be the biggest thing.
Yeah, definitely start with those top, schools that you have on the list and check their websites, because they do list scholarship deadlines on their sites, and most of them are before they tell you whether you're in or not. So it doesn't make it simple again in that sense for you, unless you were early decision, you might have had a shot, then to apply for some of them. But I've found many that are just random dates from, November to February to whatever. So definitely check each college's site for those. And then there was another one too of still paying off our own student loans. How will that affect grants and loans for our son? Unfortunately, it won't really, because any of your debt isn't really considered there. It's more of your income and your assets. So, I mean, if you were looking at an instance where your assets, you have a lot of assets and it was going to, or not even too many, but a borderline number of assets, I should say, and it may be affect your assessment, that may be worth taking some of those assets to pay off those loans, to reduce your assets in a sense. But, otherwise there really isn't any, they don't look to see, okay, great, you guys are under a mountain of debt and living paycheck to paycheck. It doesn't matter in that sense. Just like I know for a lot of us, it's also cost of living, right? Different areas have different costs of living, yet everyone's treated the same essentially, in the sense of they're looking at those raw base numbers for that FAFSA. So not helpful to us, but.
And make sure that you connect with us. Tell your friends about us. Check out our website, collegeplanningteam.com. We've got lots more information there to help you with your college journey. We've got blogs available, more upcoming events, and of course, our favorite free resources page. You can sign up for our newsletter as well, and that'll provide timely information, just, helping with making your college journey easier. If you've got any last minute questions, you can go ahead and type those in. Otherwise, you're awesome library host. Thank you so much, Brandon. We really appreciate you having us tonight. He's going to send out that recording for everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll send it out tomorrow. And maybe hopefully later the day, post it to social media as well. But that was great. A lot of information. Thank you so much.
Lots of information. So hopefully
Yes.
everyone was able to complete that survey.
Agreed.
Really does help us with just, planning future workshops and making sure that we're getting the best information to you. So thank you to everyone who's completed that.
All right. Well, I think I don't see any more questions rolling in, so I think we can shut it down. All right.
Sounds
Thanks.
great.
Thanks again, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Bye.